Empires fall, always, their weapons rust, their monuments crumble, but the spirit of the oppressed, when forged in fire, becomes eternal. These moments are not just about battleships or sanctions. They are about awakening, about reclaiming what was stolen, about rising, even when the world expected you to stay on your knees. The flame of dignity, once lit, cannot be put out by force. It spreads, it ignites others, and one day it burns bright enough to show the world the cost of its silence. When voices are silenced, when lives are dismissed like shadows at dusk, and when the cries of a people echo unanswered, something ancient stirs within. It is not rage for rage's sake. It is not noise for attention. It is the birth of thunder from the womb of silence. You see, silence isn't always surrender. Sometimes it is the soil in which strength grows quiet, unseen, deep. A people who have carried their pain in silence are not weak. They are waiting for the moment when the world can no longer ignore the tremble in their spirit, when the tides of injustice can no longer be tolerated without consequence. The world has long turned its back on Yemen, a land bruised by blockade, battered by hunger, and buried in the footnotes of headlines. But suffering does not erase dignity, and neglect does not destroy truth. The world may have watched in silence as children starved, as homes were turned to ash, as hope was choked in the dust. But beneath that rubble, something stronger than despair grew resolve. And when resolve is born in pain, it speaks not in whispers, but in storms. People ask why the Houthis are angry, why they act with such force, such fire. But the better question is this: how long can a people be ignored before their silence becomes a roar? This is not the cry of rebels without cause. It is the declaration of the disregarded, the anthem of the invisible, the stand of those who were pushed too far. For years they were labeled, demonized, erased. Yet still they stood, still they breathed. And now they move, and in their movement the world is forced to look again not at who they were painted to be, but at the truth of their defiance. What the world forgets is that dignity does not die quietly. It survives bombings, blockades, betrayals. It hides in the heart of a mother, feeding her child with crumbs and prayer. It lives in the eyes of a boy who plays among ruins and still dreams. That kind of strength cannot be crushed by power. It only grows stronger. So when that strength finally rises, it rises not as a whisper but as thunder, and thunder does not ask permission to be heard. This is not about ships or missiles. This is about a people who have been forgotten long enough. It is about what happens when those who are trampled find the courage to stand, and when they stand, the ground shakes. So let the world hear the thunder. Let them tremble, not in fear, but in the understanding that even the most silenced soul carries a storm within. When that storm is released, it does not destroy without reason. It declares, "We are here. We have always been here, and we will no longer be ignored." To stand against a force larger than yourself is not recklessness, it is remembrance. It is remembering who you are when the world tries to convince you that you are nothing. It is reclaiming your name, your breath, your soil, even when the powers that be have decided that you are unworthy of peace. You do not need permission to rise when you have been wronged. You do not need validation from those who only show up when the cameras are rolling. When your land has been scarred by bombs and your children's laughter replaced by the sound of drones, resistance is not rebellion, it is survival wrapped in courage. The world tends to side with might. It worships wealth, it trusts technology, it bows to missiles, but righteousness has never come wrapped in glitter. It shows up in dusty sandals and determined footsteps. It doesn't shout in palaces, but whispers in prayer. And when that whisper turns into action, it shakes the towers built on lies. When the Yemeni resistance strikes, it is not to boast, not to dominate, but to declare that they too have the right to exist with honor. Their fight is not a thirst for power. It is a cry to be seen, to be heard, to be free. People in suits gather and debate peace, sipping water in air-conditioned rooms, while a mother in Yemen holds her dying child with no medicine in sight. They speak of order, of strategy, of diplomacy, while bombs tear through villages. And yet, when those who are bleeding finally say, "Enough," the world dares to ask why they are angry. But the question is not why. The question is how they found the strength to endure so much, for so long, with so little. The question is how they still believe in something greater than fear. To stand up without armor, to resist without air support, to speak truth while choking on smoke, that is a kind of bravery that history often overlooks. But the soil remembers, the blood remembers, and the Red Sea, where so many secrets are buried, remembers. Those who stand today do so not because they wish to cause pain, but because they are done being treated like collateral, done being invisible. They are not waiting for anyone to give them the right to live with dignity. They are taking it, as is their birthright. There is a sacred fire that lives in the hearts of the oppressed. It does not burn to destroy, it burns to cleanse, to purify a land from foreign hands, to restore what was broken. And that fire, once lit, cannot be negotiated with or reasoned away. It must run its course, it must speak, and when it does, it says what the world refused to. We are not your pawns. We are not your victims. We are the voice you tried to silence, and now we roar. Strength does not always arrive with fanfare. It does not always wear medals or ride in on waves of applause. True strength often walks quietly beside suffering, holding its hand through sleepless nights. It shows itself when everything else is stripped away, when the bombs fall, the lights go out, the food runs low, and still, somehow, a people rise. There is no weapon stronger than a soul anchored in truth. And the Yemeni people, stripped of comfort, isolated from the world, have become warriors not because they chose war, but because truth chose them. When a mother buries her child, not because of war wounds, but because no aid was allowed through, what power do you think she finds in herself to keep going? When a father sees his fields scorched and his hopes ruined, yet still prays and provides, what do you call that but strength? It is not the strength of soldiers, it is the strength of spirit. And spirit, when tested, does not break. It bends, it weeps, but then it rises harder, sharper, clearer than before. They say Yemen is poor, but no one is poor who has this kind of resilience. No one is weak who stands with nothing and still dares to speak. What the world sees as desperation is actually unshakable belief that dignity matters more than diplomacy, that justice matters more than alliances. The world may look down on them because they lack power, but power is not always loud. Sometimes it is the quiet decision to keep resisting in the face of everything that says you shouldn't. It is easy to control those who have much to lose, but what can you take from a people who have already lost everything and still refuse to bow? That is why the most dangerous force in the world is not the one with the biggest army, but the one with the clearest conscience. The Yemeni people are not begging for peace, they are demanding it, on their own terms, not as victims but as victors, and that difference shakes empires. The truth makes its home in the heart of the oppressed. It stays there, quietly gathering strength, until one day it overflows. That overflow may look like fire, like protest, like resistance. But at its core, it is love for home, for children, for the right to live without foreign boots crushing your soil. This kind of love is dangerous to those who benefit from lies, because love like this cannot be bribed, bought, or broken. It cannot be drowned in politics or covered with propaganda. So let the world watch in confusion as the Yemeni people, with far less than their enemies, stand tall and unafraid, Let them wonder where the strength comes from. It comes from truth. It comes from faith. It comes from a fire that does not burn out because it was lit not by hate, but by the refusal to forget who they are. The Red Sea has seen the sails of conquerors and the cries of captives. It has borne witness to the passing of prophets and the pride of empires. Its waves remember what men forget: the weight of injustice, the silence of the oppressed, and the hour when tides turn. When ships sink in its waters today, it is not merely steel meeting salt, it is history echoing through the deep. For those who look closely, the sea is not just a stage of conflict, it is a mirror reflecting the arrogance of the powerful and the awakening of the forgotten. There are those who ask, why now? Why here? Why this escalation? But the sea does not erupt without winds. The current does not shift without a force behind it. For too long, the waters off Yemen's coast have carried aid for one side and neglect for the other. They have watched as foreign powers tightened a grip on land that was never theirs, using alliances and trade routes as tools of control. The Yemeni people have looked to that horizon for years, waiting for relief that never came. And now that same horizon answers not with help, but with reckoning. What is happening is not senseless violence. It is not chaos for the sake of chaos. It is a message carved into the very surface of the sea, a declaration that even in isolation, a people can find the power to respond. It is no longer just a fight for survival. It is a demand for sovereignty, and sovereignty, once claimed, does not ask permission to be defended. The Red Sea has long been a channel for wealth and war, but wealth that flows while children die is theft. War that parades as peace is deception, and now the sea carries a different cargo: resistance. Every vessel challenged, every route disrupted, is not just a military act, it is a moral one. It forces the world to pause and confront what it has allowed, what it has ignored, what it has enabled. Some will say that this stirs instability, but what is stability built on silence and suffering? True peace cannot be forged by crushing one side into the dirt. True balance cannot exist where aid is blocked and alliances blind. The Red Sea, in all its timeless wisdom, knows this. It is not angry, but it is alive, and now it speaks. To those who thought Yemen could be boxed in by borders, bombed into submission, or buried beneath the waves of global indifference, they now see that no amount of distance can drown truth. The sea may be vast, but the spirit that stirs within it is vaster still. Let the ships sink, let the headlines twist, but the memory of justice rising from the deep will not fade, for even the sea answers when the cry is righteous. And when it does, it leaves a mark too deep to ignore. Empires believe they will last forever. They stack their weapons high and build alliances on fear, thinking that power alone can silence the will of a people. But history tells another story. The greatest machines of war, the most advanced armies, all fall when they stand against those who are fueled not by greed, but by purpose. And purpose born from pain burns brighter than any fire, moves stronger than any tank. Yemen's fire is not made of missiles or oil, it is made of memory, of resistance, of the refusal to kneel. That kind of fire outlasts everything. You cannot crush a people who have already lost all and still keep standing. You cannot frighten those who have lived with war, hunger, and betrayal and still choose dignity. The machinery of power will rust. The voices that celebrated injustice will go quiet. But the flame lit in the hearts of the oppressed, that does not die. It grows slowly at first, then all at once, until it is a blaze that no blockade can contain and no headline can distort. This flame is not about hate, it is about truth. It is about reclaiming what was stolen: land, identity, voice. The Yemeni people have been painted as rebels, as threats, as pawns in someone else's game. but they are none of those things. They are a people rising from the ashes of war, with nothing left to lose, but everything worth fighting for. Their fire is not destruction for its own sake, it is purification, a cleansing of false narratives, of foreign hands, of silent complicity. And while the world may still turn its face, while leaders shuffle their papers and speak of peace without ever tasting the bitterness of hunger or hearing the sound of drones above their homes, Yemen burns with clarity. That clarity is power, not the kind that sits in offices, but the kind that moves mountains, topples regimes, and rewrites history. Let the powerful fear that fire, because it cannot be negotiated with, it cannot be bribed, and it cannot be snuffed out. It was lit by suffering, but it will be carried forward by vision, a vision not of revenge, but of liberation. And liberation, once awakened, will not return to sleep, not in Yemen, not ever again.